Hey, how are you doing? So I wanted to get on here to share a word with people who just are feeling a sense of just overwhelming loss. And what kind of brought it to my attention was I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was going through just some really hard circumstances. And he said to me, he said, I feel bitter. And I was sharing with him something that had happened to me maybe about a year ago. And I was reading in the book of Ruth. For those of you who are not familiar with that story, the story is about Naomi, who she ends up losing her husband. And not long after that, both of her sons die. And so at that time, in the Bible, women really couldn't work. So they were very dependent upon men. And if you didn't have, a husband or something taking care of you, it was pretty destitute. And at the same time, they were going through a famine. So she had told both of her daughter-in-laws to go back to the country where they were from, and that, maybe they could get remarried or whatever. And so her one daughter-in-law, Ruth, said to her, she said, wherever you go, I am going. And Naomi was like, look, there's no reason for you to follow me. I'm too old. I can't have any more sons. And she's like, even if I did get married and have a child, what are you going to do? Wait until he grows up to marry him. So she's telling Ruth to leave her, and Ruth wouldn't leave her. She's like, I'm going with you. And so they end up going to this land where Naomi is from. And when they get there, Naomi's people greet her, and they say, hey, Naomi. And she says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. And she said, because I'm bitter. And so basically the short of the story is Ruth ends up meeting this kinsman of Naomi. His name is Boaz, and she's gleaning in his field. And Boaz is a very wealthy, influential man, and he ends up marrying Ruth, and not only provides for Ruth, but provides for Naomi. And she ends up having a son, Ruth does. And this son that she ended up having ended up being the father of Jesse, which is the father of King David, and the lineage goes down to Jesus, right? So anyway, what am I getting at? So anyway, I was reading this story of Ruth and Naomi probably about a year ago, and I was relating to the feeling of loss, right? Like feeling like I had missed opportunities, that there had been wasted time, and not even just wasted time, like I wasn't doing something beneficial or fruitful or productive, but it was like I've invested all this time in some things, and it just feels like I'm not reaping the harvest of these things. And so there was just this feeling of loss. And so just this past week, I also got a letter from a guy. I do prison ministry, and he used to be in my class. And in the letter, he says to me, he says, for whatever reason this week, and he's served quite some time, maybe 10 years or something, I don't know. But he said, I was just feeling this overwhelming sense of loss. And again, he's not one of these people that is in prison just idle time. I mean, he's a extremely gifted, talented writer, very creative, humorous. He's probably written maybe over 11 books. So he was saying, it's not that I haven't used my time constructively here, but I'm just looking at all the time that I've lost. My kids are grown, cousins and nieces are grown, family members have died. And he's like, I'm going back to a world that's completely different. And he's like, I'm just feeling this overwhelming loss, right? So I got on here because I felt like I'm supposed to do this video for people who are feeling like they've missed out on opportunities. Maybe it could be bad choices that you've made, or it could be bad choices others have made to you. But whatever it is, whatever the circumstances are, you just feel this overwhelming sense of loss and grief, like too much time has passed. Oh, I'm too old. My open door has passed. Maybe it was a business opportunity or something that has failed, or maybe it is somebody who their spouse or fiance, girlfriend, boyfriend cheated on them and left them, and you're looking at the relationship like, man, I invested all this time and energy into this relationship, and now I'm left with nothing. And you're just feeling all this grief, like, how could they do this to me? Or maybe you've lost a child or a parent, and maybe it's been a long period of time, but for whatever reason you cannot get over this loss, and you keep feeling like I should be healed from this, I should be over this, but there's just this emptiness and this loss. And so I want to share this with you guys. So about a year ago, when I was reading this story about Ruth and Naomi, and I was feeling this sense of loss, and when I was thinking about her having lost her husband and having lost 2 sons, and she's up in age, and here she's serving God, and yet it's like, how could I serve God and do right and lose all these things? Was it not enough, God, that you took my husband, and then not only did you take 1 son, but you took both of my sons, all of my sons. I have nothing left, no way to provide. And so she said, I'm bitter, right? And it's never fun to admit that you're bitter. Nobody wants to admit that, right? And no matter how cute you are, bitter doesn't look good on anybody, right? Nobody wears bitterness well. And so that's where I was at, right? When I was reading this about a year ago, I was just looking at some situations, and I was like, man, for as much as I have sown, I've reaped very little. And it didn't feel just, right? It didn't feel fair. And I was looking at God like Naomi, right? It was a lot of losses and things. And I said, you know what, God, I'm bitter. And that's not a fun place to be, and we don't want to admit it, but sometimes you have to admit where you're at, right? So I told God this, right? So I get up from reading this, and I go to get my phone, and my phone isn't working. And I'm like, oh, that figures, right? Now my phone doesn't work. So I go down to the Sprint store. I go in there, and there's this young, attractive girl in there. And I go up, and of course, she doesn't know how to fix my phone, right? So of course, now I'm like, yeah, okay, now my phone's not working. I come down here. She's the only one in the store, and she doesn't know how to fix my phone. So anyway, we get to talking, and she has this tattoo on her arm. And that tattoo says, trust the process. So I printed off. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but look, this is a tattoo. It says, trust the process, right? And so I asked her about this this tattoo, and I said, what made you get this tattoo on your arm? And she said, well, I've just realized that sometimes there's things in life that we have to trust the process, that we don't understand what God is doing at the time, but if we'll just be patient and keep being persistent and doing the things that we know what we're supposed to do, that it all is going to work out, right? So I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, wow, that's interesting, right? So I said, what's your name, by the way? And guess what her name was? Naomi, right? Not a coincidence. So I knew that was God trying to tell me, hey, Julie, trust the process, right? It doesn't feel good while we're going through it, right? It's not fun. It feels like God has abandoned us. It feels like he's not just when we're going through that. But if we'll just trust the process, right, God will reverse everything. And that's exactly what happened in Naomi's situation. Yes, she did have loss. Yes, it felt like her time had passed, but God divinely reversed everything in her favor, right? And not only that, but to think that had she not lost the husband, had she not lost both sons, King David would have never been here. Jesus Christ's lineage wouldn't be here, right? So sometimes we don't understand why things are happening at the time, but there is a greater purpose. There are things working behind the scenes that we cannot see. And so, one more thing I wanted to share. So I had heard a word, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago, and she was talking about divine reversals, right? So I was headed to my parents the other day for Easter, right? They live about an hour away from me. And not far from leaving my house, I'm driving through this speed trap, right? And it's one of those that it's 35, but it's easy to speed because you're not paying attention, right? So I'm driving through there, and they're notorious for pulling people over. And I look behind me, and this cop is coming up right behind me, right? And I'm like, oh crap, I'm about to get a ticket. Last ticket I got, I think, was like $170, and not cheap, right? And so I just started praying, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm not about to get a ticket. And Satan, you're not stealing from me anymore, right? It wasn't like I was speeding through there, right? If I was speeding, it was by accident, right? As soon as I started praying that, the cop literally does a U-turn and goes the other direction, right? Wouldn't have thought much about it, except about 30 minutes later, we're going through another little town. Same thing, speed trap, right? One of these little towns, like 35 miles an hour. Same exact scenario. I look behind me, and what do I see? A cop rolling up on me, right? And again, they're notorious in that area for giving people tickets because it's a speed trap. So same thing. I'm just like, man, I'm not about to get a ticket, right? So I started praying, same thing, right? Because I'm like, man, Satan, you're not about to steal $170 or whatever out of my pocket right now. Soon as I prayed that, same thing, the cop does a complete U-turn, right? And goes the other direction. What I got out of that was divine reversals, right? It was just confirmation. And I just believe God speaks to us. If you'll pay attention, God speaks to everything. It doesn't have to be lightning, and doesn't have to be a pastor behind a pulpit. God created this earth so he can speak to us any way he wants. He can speak to us through a tattoo. He can speak to us through a cop car. He can speak to us through whatever, right? If you just pay attention and listen, God is speaking. So anyway, I wanted to get on here today just to tell you guys that I believe God is doing divine reversals. For those of you who watch this, who just feel that grief and that overwhelming sense of loss, it's okay to feel that, right? It's okay. You don't have to be putting yourself in condemnation. God is not looking at you like, oh, why don't you have enough faith? And even if you're angry at God, that's okay too, right? Be honest with God and just tell him, like, I'm angry and this is how I feel about the situation. I feel like you haven't been just, right? Because God already knows. And I just hate when Christians act like you can't be angry at God, because I feel like what happens when you do that to people, it doesn't make them stop being angry. What it does is they turn that anger somewhere else, either on a person or they go inward, and that's never good, right? So anyway, I just want to encourage you guys. I hope you guys got something out of that. But I just totally believe if you will trust the process, right? Trust the process. It's going to work out. God is going to do divine reversals. So anyway, last thing here. I don't usually do these videos, but I've had several people tell me I need to get on here and start doing these. So out of just, and I felt a nudging to get on here. I don't really like them. It's just awkward for me staring at a camera, right? I can talk in front of crowds of people, but put me in front of a camera, it's awkward. But I'm gonna start trying to get on here like once a week, just with these words to encourage you guys. So if you like this, share it with other people. But also, one last thing before I get off of here, I'm not comfortable on here. Like, I'm uncomfortable doing these videos, but I'm trying to be obedient to God with the small things. And I feel like if we're obedient with the small things, that he will increase us, right? He'll give us favor with bigger things. So that's my last word for you guys. Whatever God has been telling you to do that's uncomfortable for you, I want to encourage you to get out there and do it, even if you feel like it's not making a difference, right? Because I've felt like that in a lot of things I've done, but something in my spirit just keeps telling me, keep doing this. It's going to pay off. God has something bigger for you. And I believe that for you as well, that if you'll just keep being faithful, God has something bigger for you. So anyway, hope y'all have a great rest of your evening, night, morning, whenever you end up watching this. All right, peace out. Bye.